everybody, and welcome back to the brand new North Carolina Sports Network and this new look version of the David Glenn Show. Whether you are watching our very quickly growing YouTube channel or listening to our podcast right now, thank you for being with us here in mid-August as we get closer and closer to football season, college and pro, and soon after that, the return of many of our other favorite sports. As you know, the great state of North Carolina offers something for everyone in the sports world and in so many other ways. Our topics today include the current chaos in college sports. In recent weeks, multimedia money, meaning the billions of dollars now paid to the major conferences for the TV and streaming rights to their athletic events, with football as the crown jewel in that regard. It again has incited, number one, another round of major conference realignment. Number two, the absolute destruction of the Pac-12, a league that has been considered one of the top 5 in America for my entire lifetime. And number three, ongoing questions and lots of reckless and sometimes clueless speculation about the stability of the 70-year-old Atlantic Coast Conference, which is headquartered right here in North Carolina, especially with Florida State complaining very publicly and Clemson, Miami, and others complaining more privately about that prominent league's financial situation. The ACC, which, believe it or not, was the wealthiest conference in America on a per-school basis for most of the 1980s, 1990s, and even the early 2000s, now is in a far inferior position compared to the big bucks of the Big Ten and the SEC. That predicament now is in the process of getting much worse, with the ACC stuck in a below-market TV deal all the way through 2036, compared to the more recently negotiated and much more lucrative TV deals of the Big Ten and the SEC, which are both in the process of expanding beyond the existing 14 school memberships that you will see representing those leagues on the fields and the courts this fall and this upcoming spring. As we look forward to our upcoming visits with legendary Duke coach Mike Krzyzewski, legendary UNC coach Roy Williams, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, and many other sports legends and sports fans from the great state of North Carolina, and as we encourage you to check out our new YouTube channel for our recent interviews with Hurricanes coach Rod Brindamore, NC State legend Chris Corchiani, Duke coach Mike Elko, Wake Forest coach Dave Clawson, NC State coach Dave Doran, UNC football captain Cedric Gray, and Duke quarterback Riley Leonard, plus our throwback interviews with former President Barack Obama, best-selling author John Grisham, U.S. women's national team star Megan Rapinoe, North Carolina golf legend Davis Love III, and many others. We also will welcome shortly one of the top sports broadcasters in America today. Our friend Ian Eagle is someone you will see again soon and each week on your TV sets as one of CBS Sports' most prominent play-by-play voices on NFL games. He's also someone you will see again next spring, not only as one of the great voices on the NCAA men's basketball tournament, as he has been for decades, but also for the first time as the brand new successor to Jim Nantz as the voice of the Final Four. Ian Eagle recently and deservedly accepted the National Sportscaster of the Year award right here in North Carolina from the National Sports Media Association, which has called the great state of North Carolina home since its creation way back in 1959. Previous winners of that same prestigious award include the legendary likes of Vin Scully, Keith Jackson, whoa Nelly, Dick Enberg, Bob Costas, and more recently, Mike Tirico, Kevin Harlan, Mike Emmerich, Doris Burke, Ernie Johnson, and Scott Van Pelt. Ian is an amazing guy who, in addition to his NFL and NCAA basketball duties, somehow is also the TV play-by-play voice of the NBA's Brooklyn Nets for the Yes Network. And earlier in his career, he called the Olympics, the Army-Navy football game, major golf championships, major tennis championships, huge boxing matches, and a wide variety of other sports. You've even heard his voice on NBA Action, NBA Jam, and other video games. As we thank our sponsors, the North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of our new North Carolina Sports Network, XL Moving and Storage, who are celebrating their 25th anniversary this year, and as an Allied Van Lines agent can help you with your moving and storage needs here in North Carolina and beyond. The Lawson Insurance Group, where the Lawson brothers are ready to help you all across North Carolina with your personal and or commercial insurance needs. Jimmy's Bar and King Neptune Restaurant, my personal home away from home in Wrightsville Beach. The Original Salt Works, a legendary breakfast and lunch place in Wilmington. And our friends at Sport Clips, now with more than 70 locations across the great state of North Carolina. We ask you to support us here at this new version of the David Glenn Show by patronizing those sponsors as often as possible. It is not even a slight exaggeration to say that without them, and in a different way, without you, we would not have the honor of sharing time with you on these new platforms here at the DG Show and the North Carolina Sports Network. Okay, on to our featured special guest of the week, who recently accepted the 2022 National Sportscaster of the Year Award right here in North Carolina. Ian Eagle, welcome back to the David Glenn Show, this new version, and welcome for the first time to the new North Carolina Sports Network. How are you?
I am thrilled to be here, thrilled to be with you, DG. We obviously have a long history, and the fact that you're back in this form makes me feel good about our business, and obviously our on-air relationship. Our off-air relationship will remain the same, which is very strong, but the on-air relationship has been rekindled.
Indeed. I thank you for saying that, and I feel the same way. You know that I love sports, but I love the human part of sports maybe even more than I love the X's and the O's and the nitty-gritty. And part of this invitation is getting to know you a little better. I know you're not a me kind of guy, but for example, your family dynamics are fascinating. So let's start there. If you're willing, your dad, Jack, was a successful comedian and appeared in some extremely popular TV commercials. For those who don't know, back in the day, Dad was Brother Dominic in the Xerox commercials, Mr. Cholesterol in margarine commercials. And Ian's mom, Monica, was a singer and an entertainer as well. With your benefit of hindsight now, how do you think your upbringing impacted you becoming a broadcaster yourself?
David, not even in hindsight, in real time, I recognize that my background and my upbringing was not the norm. And because of that, it allowed me to dream of something that was also not your typical job. So when you're growing up in the 70s, you tell your parents you want to be a sports broadcaster, and they definitively tell you, well, that's what you'll do. No hesitation, no question, no real trepidation in regards to what this could maybe be as far as my life, my career. You're 8 years old and you're told that's what you'll do. It changes everything. You feel empowered. You feel emboldened that this is realistic because your parents told you that you're going to do it. So their background in a non-9-to-5 job format probably laid the groundwork for me imagining what my future could be, and the fact that it wasn't going to be a typical job, but maybe something a little off the beaten path. Fast forward, if someone in the 2000s or 2010s or now 2020s brings up this job and this vocation as a possibility, I think more parents would be open to the idea of it. But certainly back then, that was not the answer that I expected to get.
More on family stuff. The most famous, I think you and I are of the same generation, the most famous national sports broadcasting families, in my eyes, include Marv Albert and his sons, Jack Buck and his sons, Harry Carey and his sons, Dick Schaap and his son Jeremy, more recently the Golics, or even a brother combination like Greg and Bryant Gumbel, or the brother-sister combination with Reggie and Cheryl Miller. Yeah. Many of those who follow you know that your son Noah, fellow Syracuse graduate, at only 25 years old, Noah is already a prominent sports broadcaster, which is ridiculous, with the NBA's LA Clippers and now the upcoming NBC coverage of Big Ten football, among other things as well. How do you describe what went into that like father, like son story?
Well, first and foremost, it's a compliment if your kids are interested in what you do. Often that's the first step. Do they want to hear about your job? Are they curious about it? Noah was always interested and engaged in what I did. But I think, like most young guys growing up, your thought process is more along the lines on the athletic side. You have dreams of being an athlete. The realization hits for different kids at different times of, oh, wait, that's not really going to happen, despite what my dreams might be. And I'd say for him, around 13 years old, it went up a notch. I noticed his questions were a little bit different. His curiosity level was a bit higher, and it was more of the subtle parts of it: how you prepare, how you address the camera, the days leading up to the broadcast, the moment leading up to the broadcast. What are you thinking about? How do you get your thoughts in order? How do you engage with your partner, with your analyst, with your sideline reporter? These were all questions that were popping up at 13, 14, 15. And then I also noticed that he was paying attention a lot more to the mechanics of it, not just the sport that you follow, but what goes into the whole process of doing play-by-play and trying to excel at your job. So when he did inform my wife, Elisa, and I that he was truly interested in pursuing this, first there's that thought, which is, I'm so proud. And then there's that second thought, which is, oh no, I know how hard this is. I know how difficult this job can be, how challenging it can be, and how much effort and commitment it takes to really take the plunge. So when we dropped him off at Syracuse for freshman year, picking a school, he looked all over, East Coast, South, West, finally deciding on the school that I attended and the school that my wife attended. And I knew the deal there. I knew that it was going to be highly competitive. And I knew that there was a caste system in place. You don't get handed anything at Syracuse. You really have to work your way up. So you drop them off and you pull away after the hugs and maybe some tears of joy. And you now get onto the highway. In this case, it's 81 from Syracuse through Pennsylvania to 380 to 80 back to New Jersey. And my wife turns to me about 10 minutes into the ride after dropping him off for freshman year and asked me, is he going to be any good at this? Because you don't know, you have no idea until you put a headset on, until you really begin the necessary steps. So the fact that he put his mind to it and really fortunately had an aptitude for it and the talent for it, it's just taken our relationship to a whole other place. It's father and son first and foremost, but now it's colleagues, and our conversations are the type that I would have with you, David, or I would have with someone else that is the voice of an NBA team or does football on television. There's just another level of the rhetoric that we can have in the back and forth that has brought our father-son dynamic to even different heights than I anticipated.
When you won the National Sportscaster of the Year award, I actually thought back to a guy I interviewed very early in my career, the legendary UNC coach Dean Smith. And he said, among other things, that life is funny in the sense that when he went from being the guy who, quote unquote, never won the big one to taking that Michael Jordan, James Worthy, Sam Perkins team to winning it all, he said, I didn't feel like a better coach the next day. I felt like the same guy. Now, am I glad I won? Yeah, I'm glad I won. But I know who I am, right? But at the same time, and again, I thank you for allowing me a little more flexibility than our more frequent visits, because this is partly a getting to know you better process.
Yep.
Your name is now on a list of National Sportscasters of the Year that includes the likes of Vin Scully, Keith Jackson, Dick Enberg, Bob Costas, and other legends of American sports broadcasting. You have won Emmy Awards and a lot of other broadcasting honors. but how do you describe what it meant to you to receive this particular honor right here in North Carolina from the NSMA? In this case, that being a vote of your colleagues, including me, who voted for you many times and finally had the right horse who gets over the finish line.
Well, David, first of all, thank you. Thank you for your vote. I was not one that was on the street corner pounding the bell looking for votes. The fact that you thought of me in that light means the world to me. It was mind-blowing more than anything else. Humbled, and that's a word that I would use frequently, because with all of the things that I've had a chance to do, it's checking dream boxes that I had as a kid. And it's not just saying it for the sake of saying it. It's real talk. And an honor like that just puts you into a mindset of being thankful and being grateful, and also maybe taking a moment for yourself and allowing yourself to recognize that it's been a lot of hard work and a lot of putting your head down and a lot of breaks, people believing in you and trusting you. That's a really big word in our business. David, you've had such a varied career, so you understand what that means. Your boss is trusting you with this job. And it doesn't mean that they micromanage you. It doesn't mean that every day you're getting feedback. In fact, with most of the jobs that I do, I get very little feedback. And at some point you recognize that you have to self-evaluate and self-assess and check yourself. And I'm not talking about, well, every 10 games, I'll do a little rewind of what I've been working on. No, I'm talking about in the game, during the game. You've got to check yourself and remind yourself, am I doing something that I would find interesting? If I was sitting in my living room, if I was sitting in my kitchen watching the game, if I was driving in my car, if I was hanging out with friends at a bar, am I cutting through? Am I resonating with the audience? And that's really important. And I think in the moment that I had in North Carolina, being around all of these fantastic broadcasters and journalists and local fans who have put a lot of their time and energy into making sure this is a great event. Dave Gorin from the NSMA has really brought the organization to new heights because of his passion and because he cares and because he's human. And I think more than anything else, that's the quality that I want to try to maintain throughout my career. That idea that this is someone that I can relate to in some way. And I would want to have a conversation with this person and spend some time with them. It's pretty simple in its form, but it's really important when you're doing something that could be for the masses, a big sporting event. You're spending time with a lot of people, and it's a cross section of people. So you've got to do it in a way that can appeal to different types of fans, the fans that are so into it. They know everything about the teams, the sport, and then the fans that are just popping in and want to be entertained. That's important to remain conscious of that.
It's kind of crazy that you had back-to-back bucket list kind of things with the Sportscaster of the Year, of course, but also it's crazy to say this out loud, but I was just barely a high school graduate the last time Jim Nantz was not the voice of the Final Four. And I'm not exactly a spring chicken anymore. So that's a long time ago. I picture you in high school at that point, right? So now you're also the voice of the Final Four. How do you describe following someone who has been such a fixture in a specific role, but then, of course, putting your own spin on, I mean, you're 25 plus years into living your dream, calling NFL games and calling college basketball games on this national platform, but this is a different animal. And this just, gosh, I'm coming to you from college basketball country, man. And now we've got Ian Eagle as the voice of the Final Four. And I love Jim Nantz, but I was so excited to just send you that congratulatory text. What comes to mind with my rambling question along those lines?
Not a rambling question by any stretch.
I'm excited.
Yeah. David, because you've had a career that dealt on the print side, on the radio side, you recognize that the words you choose are really important. Vernacular is of the utmost significance. So I make sure that I say this the right way. Whoever I talk to, I am succeeding Jim Nantz. I'm not replacing him. I'm succeeding him. And that's a really important part of this equation. Jim is still at the top of his game, could have continued doing this event. And based on so many factors, I'm going to get the chance to now call the Final Four. That obviously comes with a great deal of responsibility. And probably because I've been doing it so long, the first NCAA tournament that I called was 1998. I fully comprehend what it means. It's not as if I did college basketball for 2 years and, oh, by the way, just the way it worked out, you're calling the Final Four. Have fun. This has literally been 25 years of my life, nearly half my life doing this job and doing it at a level where I completely understand what this means to the college basketball public, and not just the fans, but the players, the parents, the alums. It is so far reaching, and I want to do right by the event. I want to do it justice. And with all of that said, I'm going to change very little of what I've done.
Yeah.
I've called literally thousands of basketball games. So to now snap my fingers and say, well, now that I'm doing the Final Four, I'm just going to do it differently, that would be the wrong move. You've got to do what you did that got you to this place. I feel as if I have a good handle on what makes a quality broadcast and how to incorporate your teammates. In this case, Bill Raftery, Grant Hill, Tracy Wolfson, production team of Mark Wolf and Mark Grant, and so many at CBS Sports that put their heart and soul into this event. And it really is an event. That's the one aspect that maybe changes a bit for me, having called the tournament for all these years. I've called some Final Fours on the world feed. I understand the pomp and the circumstance that comes with the weekend. But look, I'm human. I'm going to feel something a little different when we're 10 seconds away from coming on the air for the first of two national semifinals on that Saturday night in Glendale, Arizona. And in a way, this is going to sound counterintuitive, but I think for a lot of play-by-play announcers, they'll understand and relate to it. In a way, I have to do less. I'm not selling this event in any form. The game is the game, and you've got to do all the things that best articulate what that event means. But it's also taking a step back and realizing that you're going to have some more crowd shots, and you're going to have more camera angles, and you're going to have some more natural sounds that pop up. And it's okay to let that filter in to show the enormity of the event. So that's some of the things that are synthesizing in my head leading into this. We still have a while to go until we have to actually go out and put it all into play. But the excitement level is really high, and the anticipation for me will be there. You just go in hoping you've got all the bases covered, and then you let the games do themselves in a certain manner.
Ian Eagle is joining us on the David Glenn Show. One of the cool things about hearing your name in my world is that I have a lot of friends who are sports fans who may not know, if they walk past you at the airport, they might not know, hey, that's Ian Eagle, and yet they're very complimentary of your broadcasting skills. In my professional world, I hear all these people who both love you as a broadcaster, but like me, also appreciate you just as a person, a human being, a colleague, etc. So when I saw Noah quoted, your son, saying, I think dad broke his phone or his personal record with the
Yeah.
number of texts he received, I knew I was one of the texts. I don't expect that you counted them literally, but he said it could have been anywhere from 500 to 1,000, just people
Yeah.
happy that I think that was the Final Four announcement rather than the Sportscaster Year. I may be merging those two, but what can you share about that? Is your phone okay?
My phone is hanging on by a thread. Noah, in fact, has told me that I probably need to just suck it up and get a new phone. I feel as if, and I don't need to give away the company. They do fine work, but we all know there's a shelf life, and they give you like 2 years, and then things start popping up on your phone that you've never seen before. So I may have to make a change at some point. It was an incredibly emotional to have that happen the way that it did. It was not a normal announcement. It had more to do with a story that had come out in the New York Post, and at that point, then I think some of the parties had to confirm what was going on. So I'm not sure that was the plan, and I have no idea how the timing worked out the way that it did. But yeah, my phone started blowing up for all the right reasons. I think something I've learned in steps along the way in my career, and it really is important to open yourself up to it. When people take pride in you achieving something, there is a feeling of togetherness and community, because for a lot of the people that reached out, they have been friends for a long time. And that means that there's a visceral effect. They feel something personally. And that's probably the biggest compliment that an individual can get, that you've had an impact on someone in that manner. Some people, I think, recognize how big the job is, and these jobs don't turn over all that much. And then there are some that are just happy that they might have a shot at tickets. It's as simple as that, David.
Since we're not far from the NFL season, and you are basically, while not a North Carolinian, I mean, you're in our households, right? I mean, you and Charles Davis and Evan Washburn, we're going to get you maybe not every week because we're not always watching your game, but we get a regular dose of you. How do you describe to those who love consuming the NFL what a game week is like for you, from your preparation to any special access you get to coaches and players, or even when you and your crew are arriving in the site's town as you're getting ready to put your next broadcast on for all of us to enjoy?
What I've realized, David, through the years with the NFL, and I felt this early, but it's become more and more apparent as there have been more options for our eyeballs and our money and our time, with streaming services and on demand and YouTube and anything that you can try to drum up on the internet. The NFL has absolutely mastered this part of our society, which is, it's a reality show and you don't want to be left behind. So it's not something you can just follow along after the fact. You need to feel like you're part of it in the moment, because others are watching live. So to say, well, I just want to have my own Sunday and do my own thing, and tonight at 11 o'clock I'll just recap everything. No, it's not realistic. With the notifications on your phone, with people texting you, reaching out, with your fantasy league, there's no way to avoid it.
Yeah.
And the NFL has seized on this mindset, and it works. It's foolproof. Every week there's a huge storyline. There's a great game or an incredible moment or something you've never seen before. So from a play-by-play man's point of view, you just want to make sure you capture those moments. They don't go by you, and then you look back and say, man, I missed it. I wasn't on it. I wasn't paying attention. I was looking down at my notes. I was focused on something else. And that keeps you sharp and it keeps you in the moment. So the week, David, it varies based on whatever else I have going on. If I'm juggling NBA games or a college basketball game or 2 NFL games, a Thursday night radio game, a Sunday NFL game, but it starts Monday morning at 8 a.m. And for me, it's the bare bones aspect of creating charts, boards that I use during the game. I'm not just going off a flip chart. I need to personalize it. I need to do it by hand. This is just me personally. I need to go color coded. I need to start setting up my brain in a manner that when I need information quickly, I know where to go, I know where to find it, and I know how to get it so that I can actually relay it to the audience in a clear and concise manner. And it starts with the skeleton of the board. And then as the days progress during the week, I'm filling in all of those gaps, personal information, background, you name it. And I'll keep my charts from usually a 4-year interval. So if I see there's any crossover, things that can live year to year, evergreen notes, and then stuff that's completely new. And then I'm delving into the 2 teams specifically, reading and consuming everything I can get my eyes and ears on for that week. And in John Nash, A Beautiful Mind fashion, I'm writing down individual notes on a piece of plain white paper, double-sided, one team on one side, the other team on the other side. And in that form, I could not go on the air. But then I'll take what I do from that and then put it into a more digestible form so that when Sunday comes, I know where everything is. Get into town Friday, you're going to practice for the home team, you're meeting with the head coach, you're meeting with 4 players, you're talking to the PR staff, you're trying to get a little more inside information, no cameras, no microphones. It's all a relaxed setting. At least that's the goal. And then I'm taking those notes. I'm typing those on my computer on a Saturday to now get them into a form that I can share with my teammates, share with the producer, share with the director, share with the camera people, with Charles Davis. Evan's doing his own notes, so often he's got his own stuff that he's looking at. And all of these ingredients come together. And by the way, all of that means very little if you get a great game. Follow the game.
Yeah.
If the game is not at the level that you hope competitiveness-wise, then you're probably delving deeper into your notes, into your background, and trying to find some new avenues to keep it moving, to keep it engaging. And I pride myself on that. And I just presume that every game I do will not have a last-second finish, so I better be ready to be entertaining and to be informative. And then guess what? You wrap up the game, and then it starts all over again on Monday morning. And I love it. I love that aspect of it. When the preseason starts, it's a soft launch for me. I do the New York Jets broadcast in the New York area, and it's heavy on the team you're covering. It's not a national game. It's a local game, but you're getting your sea legs under you for what you know is going to be a full-on deep dive into the depths of the NFL ocean come September.
Panthers fans will kill me if I don't ask one question before we let you go. And then I'm going to hit you with some lightning round and send you on to the rest of your day. Since so much can happen between now and the beginning of the regular season, let me just ask you a broad question. Frank Reich took the Indianapolis Colts to 3 winning records, 2 playoff trips over his 5 seasons there. And, of course, the Panthers have not only that new head coach, but the new quarterback in number 1 overall draft pick, Bryce Young. How do you describe in your interactions Reich's reputation around the NFL, and what are just your general preliminary expectations for the Panthers this season?
Frank is a great guy. He's done it all, seen it all. He's been in every spot that you can think of as a backup quarterback, being a good teammate, helping the starter, getting thrust, as we know, into a different role where he had to be the guy in the famous playoff comeback victory for the Bills against the Oilers. And then as a coach, every step along the way, same deal. Frank knows how to run a program, knows how to connect with players, certainly knows offense, knows the quarterback position, knows what he's looking at, knows how to deal with the media. He's the whole package. So I think Carolina made a brilliant hire. I'm not surprised that Frank landed on his feet. Last year in Indy, it went sideways. We could analyze the reasons that it happened, but ultimately things happen for whatever purpose. And I think for Frank, it ends up being a benefit in his career to start fresh, start new, and work with a young QB. My first game for CBS on the NFL was Miami at Indianapolis, September of 1998. It happened to be Peyton Manning's first game as a professional football player. Blown away by Peyton, first production meeting. He's the first person I met with in this job.
Wow.
As an NFL on CBS announcer. And he comes in, he knows my name, he shakes my hand, looks me in the eye, answers the question in just thorough fashion. I'm thinking, wow, this is the NFL.
Yeah.
And then I realized, no, that's Peyton Manning. That's just different. He's just built differently. But guess what? They didn't win that game. Threw picks. Archie Manning had his head in his hands in anguish because he knew what Peyton was going through and he knew how hard this job was. And they won 3 games that year. And then the next year, they went to the playoffs. And Peyton looked like a different guy. So the only thing I would preach is patience and not insinuating that Bryce is Peyton Manning by any stretch. Bryce has questions that he's going to have to answer. The size question is going to pop up until you prove people wrong. Drew Brees comes to mind. And Drew was really good in San Diego. Drew went to another level with New Orleans, won a Super Bowl, became one of the all-time great quarterbacks. So even after San Diego, the injury, that certainly affected the way he was being viewed. But David, it doesn't happen overnight. And it's going to be a process here for the Panthers. You just want to see enough good things and progress over the course of the season to say, okay, this is going in the right direction. I like the group they have. I like the coaching staff that is setting the tone, and I like the culture because it means a lot. You know, that word, I think I used to take it for granted when I would hear it. I thought it was a cop-out for a lot of coaches and GMs. It's not. It's a real thing. You can feel the difference when you go into an NFL facility.
The last thing for Ian Eagle, we call it our lightning round. So Ian, if you take more than 30 seconds to answer any of these lightning round questions, you have to like put money in the fine jar in the middle of the locker room.
Not going to happen.
Like I once said, I believe New Jersey Nets to you while broadcasting, while interviewing you, and you're like, DG, man, that's going to cost you, brother. Yeah, and I took no offense to that. All right, but here we go. Our great state, and this lightning round is brought to you by our friends at Sport Clips, now with more than 70 locations across the great state of North Carolina. We have beach houses, lake houses, and mountain houses here in North Carolina. Not every state has all 3. What would the Eagle family's pecking order be? Beach house, mountain house, lake house.
Yeah, lake, beach, mountain. That would probably be the order.
Short list of favorite family trips outside the United States.
We went to Spain, so we did Madrid, Barcelona, the TH, and Marbella. That probably, if you polled Elisa, my wife, my daughter Erin, my son Noah, and me, I think that would get the most votes.
Yeah, France and Italy are way, way high on the Glenn family list as well. A few of your favorite bands or musicians, now or then?
Number 1 band of all time, The Doors. I just fell in love with them in my teen years, into my college years, and wore out the cassette player, later the CDs. Just number 1 band of all time for me. And number 2 would probably be quite a distance behind them, but The Who would also
Nice.
be up there.
Nice.
Huge fan, fortunate to get to see them in concert. Billy Joel individually is someone that I would see at any point of any month of any year and still just love his music. And then, if you're going now current, there are a lot of artists that I highly respect, and Drake would be one of them. I just think he pumps out really good, interesting music and does it in a way that's not always the same time and time again. So we could probably do about 30 minutes on that, not just 30 seconds, but I want to get in under the buzzer.
You don't have to do all these, but if anyone comes to mind in any of these, favorite actor, actress, author, or artist, any of those?
Yeah, I mean, favorite actor varies on the era. I was obviously a huge De Niro and Pacino fan when those guys were really churning out movie after movie after movie. Most recently, there are so many good actors on the TV side that you have to give credit where credit is due. What Bob Odenkirk has done in multiple roles now has really blown me away. The fact that I just read his autobiography, the fact that acting was not even on his radar screen, and he became what he became, thoughtful and comedic and dramatic when necessary. Got to give him roses for what he's done over the last few years in becoming the all-around performer that he is. Meryl Streep to me is the best all-time actress. The fact that she was a chameleon, the fact that she could do drama, she could do comedy, she could do thrillers, she could do it all. Just thinking about the variety of roles that she's taken on is beyond impressive. And then, recently the shows that I've consumed of late are the ones that stick with you because they're current. The Bear crushed it. Season 2 of The Bear was so good. It's really good when you're excited about the next episode. And I'm not one that usually watches 6 at a time. I like to space it out because I like to savor it. And then you get to the last one and you don't want to watch it because then it's over. That means the show has accomplished everything it was set out to do. So Righteous Gemstones is another one that I've watched religiously, and I just thought this past season was brilliant, hilarious. Danny McBride is just a funny dude.
I felt the way you just described with Ted Lasso. I just didn't want it to end. Last thing for you. This one might be an unfair question because I do not know your dietary habits, and you may you may not be familiar with North Carolina barbecue. Now, most of my featured guests either live here, born here, work here, whatever. You're kind of an asterisk. I say you're a North Carolinian because you're on our screens all the time. So you're less familiar probably with North Carolina barbecue. But the way I usually phrase the question is, if you eat pork, I don't even know that, would you go Eastern style barbecue, Western style barbecue, ribs, bacon, or some other pork product? Because our number one sponsor is the North Carolina Pork Council. Without them, like this new version of our show wouldn't exist. So Eastern is the vinegar-based barbecue. I don't want to offend you if you already know these things, but
no, you're not offending me at all.
Okay, Western would be the more ketchup-y, tomato-y based barbecue, and in our state, like Eastern versus Western is, you got to be careful how you answer that question. But you could go bacon or ribs or anything else.
Yeah, well, check. Love bacon, check. Love ribs. Here's where it gets really interesting because I do have dietary issues. It's been well documented on other podcasts because I get asked about it. I have the palate of a 9-year-old. I'm not adventurous. I stick to what I like. I don't usually go outside the lines. There are certain foods I've never had. It freaks people out that I've never had them.
I remember this.
I've never had certain things. But with that said, I want to answer your question, and it's important. I've never had salad, so I don't like dressing, and I don't like condiments. So this is where the East and West come into a play. Vinegar-based would throw me off. I do not want that. Now, if it's in it and there's nothing I can do about it, and I didn't know about it, I'll plead ignorance.
Yeah.
I don't eat ketchup, but if it's in something and it's been dealt with
You
behind
can't really
closed
tell.
doors,
Yeah, you can't.
then I don't know about. Like barbecue sauce to me is not a condiment; it's a sauce. Is
Gotcha.
there ketchup in it somewhere? It maybe, but I don't need to know about it. So it sounds like I'm more of a Western barbecue. And let me also mention this point: because of all of my trips to Kansas City through the years doing the NFL, I have gotten used to their style of barbecue, and I've always thought it's excellent. And I didn't really think of it as a competition. I had the NCAA tournament this past year in Greensboro, and one of the nights they brought in barbecue for us for our production meeting. And it may have been the best barbecue I ever had in my life.
Yeah.
So my whole sense of reality was thrown on its side, that I now all of a sudden had a soft spot for North Carolinian barbecue that I didn't even know was a thing compared to the Kansas City barbecue. I was just one of those guys like, barbecue's barbecue.
Right.
Slap some barbecue sauce on it. It all tastes great. So I now recognize there's a difference.
Excellent.
I don't know if I've answered your question, but I do know that the stuff you mentioned, I like it.
That's really good stuff, man. And remind folks quickly, what else is on that list of things you've never had that freaks people? Because I had forgotten this about you. It does.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had coffee. I've never had any type of melon. So you name it, honeydew, watermelon, never had it. I don't eat ketchup. I don't eat mustard. There's a lot. There's a lot more. I don't want to end this on a down note, because any of your listeners or viewers up to this point may have thought, oh yeah, Ian's a normal guy. He seems like a good dude. And then you hear this, you're like, oh, he's a freak. There's something wrong with it.
Oh man. Well, you may be a freak, but the bottom line is you're a freakishly good broadcaster and a hell of a nice guy. So we're going to put up with whatever other freakish type qualities you may have. Thank you for this extended visit. I always keep you longer than I originally intended, but thanks for 20 years of friendship and cooperation, and congratulations on your continued success. I'll be knocking on your door again down the road.
David, anytime you knock, I'll answer, and I'm just thrilled that you're back, thrilled that you and I get to do this all over again, and thrilled for the people of North Carolina that now have someone they can count on day in and day out, that knows what they're talking about, that cares about the subject matter, and really, truly loves what they do. And it comes across every time I talk to you.
Thank you, my friend. Keep up the good work. We'll talk again soon.
All the best, DG.
And we'll be right back after this. As we thank Ian Eagle for his time here on the David Glenn Show and jump into the chaotic world of TV money, college sports realignment, the Atlantic Coast Conference, Florida State, and a very powerful and impactful ACC document known as the Grant of Rights, one quick reminder: in sports, we talk a lot about impact players who make a positive difference. And when it comes to our state's economy, the North Carolina pork industry is a true MVP. Each year, the pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across the state. It contributes more than $10 billion a year to the North Carolina economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs. Learn more about their positive impact at ncpork.org. That's the North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. With that, we move on to the topic of the week, the month, even the entire summer in the college sports world. There have now been perhaps 10 rounds of the ACC is falling apart headlines in recent years. And it's important to remember that all 10 rounds proved to be false, or at the very least premature. The folks responsible for those false reports are almost never actual journalists. They're often motivated more by clickbait than by accurate reporting. And as I try to emphasize in the journalism parts of the classes that I teach at UNC Wilmington, their downfall is rarely making stuff up or lying to you on purpose, which are really dangerous and destructive habits that are in the process of costing Fox News, for example, literally billions of dollars in legal settlements in a non-sports context. Instead, the mistake behind the bogus ACC is falling apart headlines, which may be accurate one day, but again, has a truly woeful, for an awful lot track record to this point, is almost always that the person trying to break the news learns one or two important new facts, but then fails miserably at another very important aspect of sports journalism. That is putting the puzzle pieces you do have into a broader context and accepting that there are almost always puzzle pieces that you do not have. This process requires patience, journalism skills, and some combination of institutional knowledge and multiple sources representing multiple and diverse parties and other expertise that most of the inexperienced breaking news folks simply do not have. That's why they keep getting stuff wrong, which is understandably frustrating for the ACC fans out there. In part, with such errors in mind, we are here to help. Here is a fact-based look with just a little opinion sprinkled in, and I will label it that way. This is a fact-based look at what's happening with the ACC here in the summer of 2023, brought to you by our friends at the North Carolina Pork Council. Did you know the North Carolina pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state? The pork industry contributes more than $10 billion a year to our state's economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs, primarily in small rural communities across eastern North Carolina. Learn more at ncpork.org. That's the North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. Okay, on to the big topic of the day, the week, the month, the latest ACC is falling apart headlines. Number one, there is an August 15th deadline every year if you want to tell the Atlantic Coast Conference that you are leaving the following year. That means if Florida State or anyone else wanted to leave the ACC in 2024, they would need to notify the ACC in writing by this August 15th, which of course is almost here. I personally do not expect any ACC school to meet that withdrawal deadline this year, but it is important to mention it just in case as a starting point for today's discussion. Number two, the biggest error many fans are making, even knowledgeable fans, while analyzing this FSU ACC showdown, is criticizing or really emphasizing the Seminoles' recent performance on the field. While it is true that FSU is only 36 wins and 36 losses overall, and actually has a losing record, 21 wins and 27 losses in conference play over the last 6 seasons combined. That is the definition of mediocrity, right? It is also absolutely positively true that when it comes to TV money and the sheer dollar value that any program provides to the ACC in its TV negotiations, how many people watch a particular school's games matters infinitely more than how many games that school is winning. I know that's counterintuitive to some people, but it is true. Those two things, of course, winning and how many people watch, obviously become related to each other over time. But at the end of the day, a conference's TV partners care less about who is winning, and they're willing to pay for how many people are watching. This is where FSU has maybe its strongest argument. While you're making fun of the Seminoles' recent on-field record, FSU officials can show beyond any shadow of any doubt that even when they're not winning as much, millions of people are still watching their football games. In fact, if you exclude teams that are already in or on their way to the Big Ten or the SEC, the 3 biggest football TV draws in America are Notre Dame, Clemson, and Florida State. Oregon and Washington are also in the top 5, by the way, which is one big reason they have been on the Big Ten's radar for the last year or so. Florida State football games get 70% more viewers in an important category than when the average what the average ACC football game gets. And that is a very big deal that favors the Seminoles. If you do not understand and accept and embrace that aspect of this story, you will never understand the rest of this story. Number 3, one thing that has been reported accurately is that the ACC is in the most vulnerable position of its entire 71-year history. Why? Because Florida State officials are not exaggerating about the size and nature of the growing financial gap between the Big Ten and the SEC, as by far now the wealthiest leagues in the history of college sports, and then the ACC and the Big 12 on kind of a distant second tier. The Pac-12 may be in the process of imploding as we speak, so the Power 5 phrase may soon become the Power 4 conferences instead, but that's another story for another day. Without bombarding you with all the numbers, the Big Ten and the SEC right now send annual shared revenue checks to their member schools that are in the $50 to $60 million range. Those annual checks, sent by the ACC and the Big Ten right now, are in the $40 to $45 million range. So let's oversimplify it a bit and call it a $10 to $20 million annual gap right now. That annual financial gap between the Big Ten and the SEC in the top tier and the ACC and the Big 12 on the second tier is projected to grow gradually to $30 million per year and perhaps even $40 million a year by the end of the current decade. Number 4, this is also very important to understand. Those future annual gaps of 30 to 40 million a year are not based on projections or speculation. They are based on multimedia contracts already signed. Starting this year, the Big Ten has a combination of extremely lucrative TV deals with Fox, CBS, NBC, and the Big Ten Network that collectively are worth more than $1.1 billion with a B per year. And they extend all the way through the 2029-2030 season. Starting next year, the SEC has lucrative TV deals with ABC/ESPN and the SEC Network all the way through 2033-34. The Big 12 has deals with ESPN and Fox all the way through 2030-31. Meanwhile, the ACC is stuck in a below-market deal with ABC/ESPN and the ACC Network all the way into 2036, 13 years from now. Right now, the ACC does make more than $400 million a year just in TV revenue. That's not total revenue. That's the $400 million just in television revenue. And while that number will continue to grow each year, it is a much, much smaller number than what the Big Ten and the SEC are going to be making with their new deals. So again, the ACC financial crisis is very real, at least in that regard. Number 5, it is absolutely accurate to say that the current financial gaps among the top conferences have not stopped the ACC from winning on the field. Remember, the ACC, which was the wealthiest conference in America on a per-school basis 20 years ago, I was covering it back then, has fallen behind financially over this last decade or so. But during the 2022-23 academic year, this most recent one, ACC schools won more NCAA team titles, 9, than any other conference. Even if you put together the last 2 academic years, the ACC also ranks first above the SEC, above the Big Ten, in NCAA team titles over that 2-year period. Even in the highest profile sports, the ACC has actually been faring pretty well, even while falling behind financially. 3 of the last 10 national championships in football have been won by ACC schools. Florida State in 2013 and Clemson in both 2016 and 2018. Only the SEC has more football natties in that period. The Big Ten, by the way, has only 1 in that decade. Current members of the ACC also have won 4 of the last 10 NCAA titles in men's basketball. The Big Ten and the SEC both have 0 NCAA men's basketball titles in that same period. They're wealthier, but they're not winning at a higher level, at least not in that sport. Obviously, the relatively small financial deficits of the last decade or so have not stopped ACC schools from winning big on the field, including in the most prominent sports. At the same time, of course, it's fair for FSU or you or me to wonder how long that trend can continue once the deficits grow from 10 million or so a year to 30 or 40 million a year. Number 6, Florida State sees movement in other major conferences. Oklahoma and Texas have left the Big 12 for the SEC. UCLA and Southern Cal are leaving the Pac-12 for the Big 10. Arizona and Colorado and maybe others are leaving the Pac-12 for the Big 12. And the Seminoles want to signal publicly to the Big 10 and the SEC, and in a different way to the ACC. Again, by far, those first two are the wealthiest leagues in college sports. They're signaling that they are willing to jump. It may not sound like a big deal for fans, but remember that university presidents, the people who make these ultimate decisions in the Big 10 and the SEC, they have been absolutely adamant about wanting to avoid the appearance of being predatory, meaning going out of their way to aggressively attack and destroy another major conference. If the Seminoles come to them, then those same university presidents can just shrug their shoulders and say, we were simply responding to the marketplace. When Florida State publicly declared itself essentially a free agent, which FSU officials have been doing a lot lately, we felt compelled as presidents to at least listen and consider their potential candidacy. FSU officials also want to show their own fans that they're treating this financial matter with the same urgency that is clearly emanating from the Seminoles fan base. And FSU officials want to put as much public pressure as possible on ACC officials with those antagonistic public declarations, which brings us to our next fun fact. Number 7, thanks in part to mostly internal, more private pressure from Florida State and Clemson and other officials in particular, the ACC already has announced that it is making the most dramatic change to its financial distribution rules in the history of a league that is more than 70 years old. While there have been some small variations over the years, the ACC has basically been what we call an equal shares league. That means that everyone gets essentially the same slice of the financial pie every year when it's time to send those annual shared revenue checks from the conference headquarters. Starting in 2024, next year, for the first time, the ACC is adopting at least some aspects of unequal revenue sharing at the requests of the Seminoles and the Tigers and others. In May of this year, the ACC publicly announced that its new revenue sharing policy means that individual schools will be rewarded for what they do in the football and men's basketball postseasons. That means that if your ACC school makes the college football playoff or a huge bowl game or advances in the NCAA basketball tournament, that school will get more than just a 1/14 or 1/15 share of that postseason revenue the way it was split in the past. With this new policy, the most successful schools believe they can increase their annual ACC payouts, at least in some years, by $6 to $10 million. Now, that obviously does not close the financial gap behind the Big 10 and the SEC, but it is a new performance-based step in the right direction in the eyes of those schools. Remember, too, that Florida State has the ACC's second largest athletics budget behind only Notre Dame, and that FSU's annual ACC check, let's call it 40 million plus and rising, actually makes up only 28% of the Seminoles' $150 million athletics budget. So that annual ACC check from the headquarters of the conference is important, but again, it's only paying 28 to 30% of the Seminoles' athletics bills every year, which puts this picture in one more context. Number 8, what Florida State, Clemson, and even Miami and others also want, but were denied in those same recent negotiations with their fellow ACC members, was another radical change to the league's longstanding revenue sharing model. Those schools also want those members who draw the most TV eyeballs to get larger shares than those who draw fewer TV eyeballs. In football, for example, Duke, Wake Forest, and Boston College draw average audiences in a certain category in football below 1.5 million viewers. Florida State and Clemson, on the other hand, have average audiences in that same category of more than 3 million viewers, so more than double the size of what those smaller audiences are for the Devils and the Deacons and the BC Eagles. For now, at least, the majority of ACC members have been unwilling to make that change to the revenue sharing model, and that has left FSU and Clemson and Miami to varying degrees very unhappy. Number 9, if an ACC school announced right now that it was planning to leave next summer, meaning 2024, that school would automatically lose one very large but manageable amount of money, and it would also put at severe risk a much larger amount of money, meaning hundreds of millions of dollars. So you might make tens of millions more per year in your new league, but it might be really expensive to the tune of hundreds of millions for that exit. It's a two-part formula. Part 1 is simple. ACC bylaws have an exit fee that amounts to 3 times the league's operating budget. The ACC's current operating budget is, let's call it, roughly $40 million a year. That means the standard exit fee alone would be something around $120 million. That exit fee would inch up in future years, but let's say $120 million right now. Everyone agrees that this clause is ironclad, beyond a legal challenge. But a $120 million exit fee obviously would not scare any school if that school knows it can increase its annual check by 30 or 40 million a year in its new league. That is exactly the logic that led Maryland to leave decades worth of ACC membership behind for the much wealthier Big Ten right about a decade ago at this point. Part 2 of this exit phenomenon is way more complicated. Everyone has heard by now about the grant of rights, which is not something that Maryland had to worry about a decade ago. In fact, the ACC's grant of rights was created as a reaction to the Terrapins' departure, as a way to add stability to a league, the ACC, that desperately needed it at the time, and also as a way to convince ESPN, the TV partner, to move forward with the creation of the ACC network. The Big Ten had its own network. The SEC had its own network. The ACC wanted one, and the grant of rights was part of the negotiations with ESPN to create the ACC network. ESPN said it's going to be really expensive to create that. We need a long-term commitment. That's why the ACC schools did commit to the new TV deal and the grant of rights all the way through 2036, which obviously is a long time down the road. Under the league's current bylaws, any ACC school leaving, let's say, in 2024, would be leaving behind 12 years worth of their multimedia rights, because these ACC schools, including FSU, signed their grant of rights all the way through 2036, meaning the length of those TV deals with ESPN. Moving forward, ACC media rights are worth ballpark 30 to 40 million per year per school. So I believe we're talking about a number over 12 years combined with a value of more than $400 million. When you add a standard $120 million exit fee, and then the loss of $400 million or so in media rights fees over the next 12 years, plus the reality, remember, that your new league, if you leave, cannot benefit financially from your home games unless, all the way through 2036, unless you somehow get out of this grant of rights. That is a conundrum that basically equates to a $500 million or $500 million question. Remember, why would your new league pay you a full portion of its shares revenue if you join and jump to them if that new league cannot financially benefit from your home games until 2036? Number 10, various forms of a grant of rights have been a part of college sports for a full decade now, including in the Big 12 and the ACC. Why do you think it took Texas and Oklahoma so long to leave? And no school has ever challenged a grant of rights in court, much less somehow escaped or even minimized the impact of a grant of rights. In my opinion, as an attorney here in North Carolina since 1994, and as someone who has practiced contract law specifically and has seen these actual documents, it is a sound legal contract. There are no obvious loopholes, and there's a big reason why nobody has challenged it to this point. At the same time, of course, that does not mean that Florida State, and it has plenty of attorneys trying to find these loopholes, or somebody else in the ACC won't decide to become the first to challenge a grant of rights in court. As many FSU officials have now said publicly, they are going to be falling behind in their eyes by an average of $30 million a year or more if they don't challenge the status quo in the ACC. So it's a different kind of penalty in their eyes if they just sit quietly in the coming years. So what's the bottom line? Well, that requires going beyond today's 10 fun facts and engaging in what I will label educated speculation. I candidly admit that I do not have a crystal ball here. Whereas it is a crystal clear story and situation that Florida State would leave the ACC as soon as possible if the right offer came along, it is not at all clear that the Seminoles will receive that offer anytime soon. Now, the Seminoles are, because of that football TV power, among the most appealing schools that are not already in or on their way to the Big Ten or the SEC. But remember this, the Big Ten just spent an entire year, 12 months, thoroughly vetting Oregon and Washington as expansion candidates. So the idea of an official offer to the Seminoles coming in a matter of days or weeks is just almost unthinkable and really laughable. Similarly, the SEC is focused on the incoming Oklahoma and Texas programs. And it is not entirely clear, by the way, whether Florida State and or Clemson would automatically, under the current circumstances with the grant of rights, automatically add more value to the SEC than they would be taking away as an additional mouth to feed. Why, for example, would ESPN agree to pay the SEC a new premium for the potential additions of Florida State and Clemson when ESPN already holds the rights to the Seminoles and the Tigers home games at a very discounted rate with the ACC all the way through 2036? And what incentive does ESPN have to destroy or even damage the ACC and its ACC network that it does a collaborative effort between ESPN and the Atlantic Coast Conference? What incentive does ESPN have to harm the second most important collegiate partner that it has, the Atlantic Coast Conference? The only more important partner it has in college sports is the SEC and the SEC network. Those are questions that don't have easy answers, and that those at FSU saying that something is about to happen, I think, are really minimizing to a degree that is unreasonable. The most likely scenario by far is that FSU, Clemson, the Big Ten, and the SEC spend the next year more thoroughly vetting their options, both with each other and with the ACC's pesky but solid through now grant of rights. Meanwhile, the Seminoles and the Tigers continue to pressure the ACC for additional changes to that revenue-sharing model. And the folks at the ACC headquarters, which currently is in the process of moving from Greensboro, North Carolina, where it's been for the entire 70-year history of the ACC, to Charlotte, which is a big business, even international business mecca, where the league hopes to expand its advertising and sponsorship relationships. Maybe that can be the new revenue streams, the source of the new revenue streams that allows the ACC to not close the gap, but take one more step toward minimizing that financial gap that right now, again, is significant, but the projections through the end of this decade and beyond are really, really scary to Florida State and Clemson, and in different ways, every other member of the league. By the time the ACC's annual exit deadline arrives on August 15th, 2024, meaning next summer, all parties involved likely will have at least a bit more clarity. In the meantime, while it is hard to imagine the current version of the ACC remaining intact all the way through 2036, it is also hard to see a quick and easy path to any of these schools departing anytime soon. And keep in mind, with each passing year, the financial cost of the grant of rights does go down, meaning the cost of a negotiated exit also would go down if the ACC was willing to engage in those negotiations with a departing school. At some point, long before 2036, unless the ACC somehow finds those new revenue streams, the legal, financial, and realignment planets probably are going to align such that some combination of Florida State, Clemson, and perhaps other ACC schools do end up elsewhere. In the meantime, among the few certainties is that you will see more false and misleading headlines before you see one that gets this very fluid situation exactly right. As we say goodbye for now, some quick reminders about some other fantastic guests who will be joining us in the weeks to come. One of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, Duke's Mike Krzyzewski, will be our featured guest in 1 week on August 17th, my birthday. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, a huge Caniac and a big-time sports fan, also will join the David Glenn Show most likely on August 24th. We will be talking sports, of course, not politics. Yet another Hall of Fame coach, Roy Williams of the University of North Carolina, will be a featured guest on another upcoming show. Carolina Panthers legend Julius Peppers from Southern Nash High School in Little Bailey, North Carolina, and a two-sport athlete at Carolina before becoming a dominant defensive end for the Panthers and others in the NFL. He wasn't the most talkative guy with the media during his playing career, but in retirement, he's more accessible and having more fun sharing his stories as he goes into the Panthers' Ring of Honor. Pep also will be joining a future edition of this program, as will former Carolina Panthers quarterback Jake Delhomme, who now works as part of the Panthers broadcasting team. Other future guests include our good friend and North Carolina Central University basketball coach Lavelle Moten, who's not only an amazing story as a former athlete and an incredibly successful Division I basketball coach, he's a truly inspiring member of multiple communities here across North Carolina. If you have a suggestion for a future guest or any other ideas or feedback for the new North Carolina Sports Network or this new look version of the David Glenn Show, please send us an email at davidglennshow@gmail.com. We do read and consider all thoughtful emails, and if you're asking a question, we may even include your email with our answer on a future edition of this program. Last thing, it's our weekly reminder. Please subscribe to our official YouTube channel. We will have new prizes for the 750th and 1,000th subscriber, which will be in the near future. We blinked our eyes and we were past 500 and some. So thank you for that. On social media, remember, that's YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, etc. Here at the North Carolina Sports Network, we are at the NC Sports Net. That's THE NC Sports Net. When you subscribe to that YouTube channel, remember it is free and it is as easy as clicking the subscribe button next to the video box where you're seeing me right now. You are automatically eligible for very cool prizes. Those include free tickets to upcoming college and pro sporting events, free concert tickets you can attend with or without me, free rounds of golf, again, play with or without me, free dinners at some of North Carolina's best restaurants, again, with or without me, including there in Wrightsville Beach at the unforgettable King Neptune. Okay, that'll do it for today's edition of the program. The David Glenn Show is an exclusive production of the North Carolina Sports Network. Executive producer, Mike Waddell. Technical director, J.R. Quitman. The founding partner of NCSN is the North Carolina Pork Council. Goodbye, everybody, and thanks for spending some time with us today on the David Glenn Show and the North Carolina Sports Network. We look forward to seeing you again, along with Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Governor Roy Cooper, Julius Peppers, and our many other great guests in the weeks to come. Thanks again.